Hello and welcome to Red Shirt Cinema Club, a weekly podcast about fandom and watching movies with friends. This week is our final week in the company of David Lynch. We're watching his dream, nightmare vision of Hollywood, Mulholland Drive. More than ever, we recommend you watch the film before listening. We'll wait here, and when you're ready, we'll start out on the mysterious, winding road.
I can't believe it. I'm just so excited to be here. I'm in this dream place.
This one comes highly recommended.
Dream place. What are you doing?
Get out of the car.
Yeah. The girl is still missing.
What's wrong?
I just don't know who I am.
I wonder where you were going. Mulholland Drive. Come on, it'll be just like in the movies. We'll pretend to be someone else. Silencio.
This is all an illusion.
You want to know who you are, don't you?
Where's this going?
Mulholland Drive.
It's been a very strange day.
Getting stranger.
Silencio.
Hello and welcome back to Red Shirt Cinema Club. I am your host, Nathan Dighton, and I'm joined today by starry-eyed ingenue Robert Pearson
I don't know what that means.
and hairy dirtball who lives behind a bin,
What?
David Jackson.
For God's sake, I think we've pushed this too far now. Okay. What do you mean why? Because I've just been introduced as hairy dirtball who lives behind a bin. Rob got starry-eyed ingenue. He doesn't even know what it means. He doesn't deserve it.
You're a very important part of the plot of the film that we've watched this week, which is Mulholland Drive. I say plot. It'll be interesting to see if we think there was a plot or what was happening in Mulholland Drive. But this marks the end of our adventure with David Lynch. I hope it has been an adventure. And I loved rewatching this film. It's long been one of my favourites. And I was extremely excited to revisit it to see whether I still felt the same way. And I'd watched almost all of David Lynch's movies in order up to this point. So it was just, I had a great time. And I'm really interested to know, had either of you watched it before?
No.
Oh, interesting times. So I propose that we go through, I've got more notes than we have time for. I will tell you that. So I've got pages and pages and pages of notes. I'd like to go through it relatively chronologically just to point out some stuff which I enjoyed, which you enjoyed. In keeping with my whole take on David Lynch, you get people out there who are like, this is what's really happening. And at this moment, this means this. And there's a fish in this scene and it means that this person's probably Jesus. And I don't believe in, or I don't care about any of that stuff. And there are more just scenes that I really enjoy and convey a particular kind of feeling to me. What did you guys think, though?
Well, who wants to go first? I hesitate to say that I loved it. I think I did. I thought it was incredible, I guess is what I'm saying. I don't know if that's the same as loving it. I found it, I loved every second of watching it, so I guess there's that. Yeah. I sat at the end of the film, just kind of sat. I don't even know what I felt. I was feeling something, and I don't think I could tell you what it was.
Yeah.
I managed to catch myself throughout the film trying to put the pieces together, and was like, just don't do that.
In a way, that's a lovely feeling as well, though. The tantalizing feeling that it might make sense.
Yeah. Although I do think that this film it's so close to making sense that it's it's hard to fight that. I was trying to think, I've really resisted, because this is the first time actually we've had to watch a movie a couple of days before we actually get to talk about it. I've resisted the temptation to look up any information about it or any takes on like what's going on, what does it all mean, because I wanted to have this conversation with you guys and talk about it rather than read someone else's take on it. But there's loads I want to talk about in this movie. Ultimately, I guess I did love it. But more than that, I loved watching it. I don't know. And like I said, I just sat at the end, just feeling all kinds of things. Actually, it's such an incredible, powerful watch.
I love that. Excellent. What about you, Rob?
I thought this was a masterpiece. Wow. I thought it was unbelievable. I think it's incredible that David Lynch has made a film that might be in my top 5 most hated films of all time, and a film that I don't know where it would sit in my top films of all time. But I have not been able to stop thinking about this film since watching it. I thought, I felt like, having just finished it, I sort of knew what was going on. I was like, oh, that was a good twist. And then I thought about all of the things, but wait, why then when they were in that place did they see that? And realised that really, and there were so many scenes that were just vibes, right? Like the scene that really unsettled me was near the start, where there's those two guys, you don't come back into it until one of them, right at the very end. They're just in the diner, and one man is explaining
Winkies.
to the other about
Winkies.
About a really unsettling nightmare that he's had. And I was just watching this scene feeling incredibly unsettled and on edge, not really sure why. A combination of the music and the performances and what the camera was doing, but like it was so expertly crafted. It felt like David Lynch really just knew what the heck he was doing by this point in his career, knew exactly the kind of film he wanted to make. And it is one of, I guess, there have been a few examples over the years of filmmakers trying to give their interpretation or their take on what Hollywood is as a thing, I guess almost like a director making a comment on what they think of the film industry. Tarantino did it fairly recently with Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, which is a very different interpretation, I think, of Hollywood than this film. And I think it certainly continues the David Lynch trend of presenting you with the glamorous facade and then showing you the rotten reality underneath. There's a lot of that going on. But yeah, I did allow myself to just enjoy the vibes of it. There are two scenes in it, one of which was the diner scene. The other was the scene in the theatre, which
let's talk about that.
Absolutely blew me away. And especially, and when it finished, I was like, I immediately just wanted to watch it again to see if things became clearer or more apparent, or had something I'd missed on first watch, that having known what then happens at the end, whether it would mean something different on a second viewing. I've not watched it again yet, but I want to before my Studio Canal 7-day free trial runs out.
Well, I actually bought it.
Oh,
so
I should have done. I
took the risk. I thought I'm probably going to like this movie, so I bought it. So if you want to borrow, digitally, I don't know how I can share it. We'll figure it out.
I had the premium viewing experience of this, which was that I had been for work. The reason this is late is I was in Los Angeles last week for work, and I added a couple of days at the end, mostly so that I could visit David Lynch's house, which is reasonably ghoulish, I think. And I thought about it, and if it hadn't been for the fact that David Lynch's house is the house in the movie we haven't watched called Lost Highway, and it features quite prominently in the movie. Bill Pullman lives there, and he's visited by lots of people, the police, but someone who's like posting videotapes into his house, and it's the site of a mystery, and it's the last location in the movie as well. And so I kind of thought, I'm not going to just see where this dead person that I admire the work of lives. That would be awful. I'm going to see this house, and it is right up in the hills underneath Mulholland Drive. So if you're on Mulholland Drive, you can look down onto the back of the house. So I went and I drove up, and it was funny. I hired a car and I asked for the smallest car, so it would be as cheap as possible, but also because I'm used to driving small cars, and I got upgraded. This guy was so pleased that he'd upgraded. I got you a great car, and he got me a fucking Jeep. I was just driving around.
It's
Hollywood.
not just a Jeep, it looks like a SWAT car.
Yeah.
An armoured
cool
SWAT van.
It does. It looks like I'm about to do a bank robbery. And I was driving that up and down, just trying to find somewhere to stop. You're not really allowed to stop. And actually, there's loads of signs saying, like, tour buses, do not fucking stop in this neighborhood. It's all famous people who just don't want you to be there, which is completely fair enough. But the opening... Well, actually, I would say, and then I was delayed by a day, and I was trying to watch this film so that we could talk about it on the day that I got back, and I was delayed by a day because I missed a connection on the way back. So I ended up watching this. I begged to stay in my hotel room in Denver. It was like I was in the middle of nowhere. So I was in this terrible airport hotel, and people were like cleaning other rooms all around me, and I was just sat blackout curtains on this sofa in this hotel room watching it on like a TV screen. But it's just the best. It was somehow perfect. I don't know why. It was just great. It really had the kind of vibe of the Hitman scene, which we'll get to in a bit. But I will say, so the opening, there's that weird sort of jitterbug montage, which kind of makes sense a bit later on because you realise that Betty won a jitterbug competition, and that's when she decided to get into acting, which is quite funny in of itself. But the kind of real opening is a limo on Mulholland Drive itself, and I'm glad I went there just because being up there we've all been to LA a bunch of times, and it's a very strange, very large place, and it doesn't really have a center, and it's got a few neighborhoods all over the place. But when you're up in the hills, it's much calmer. You don't have that kind of relentless, endless grid system, and you can see everything kind of laid out ahead of you. And there's like trees up there, and it feels different, but it's also kind of scary and isolating at the same time. So that's where this opening happens, the limo on Mulholland Drive, and it's kind of a classic noir opening, like beautiful, mysterious woman. There's a gun, and she's told to get out of the car, and we don't stop here. And that actually made me laugh when I watched the movie. We don't stop here, because like I said, there's loads of signs saying don't stop anyway. It's almost like she's just enforcing the no tour bus rule. Don't stop here. And then she walks off down into there's no way you could actually do that walk. It's a cliff. But anyway, she walks down the hill and into the city, and that's where the mystery starts. Any thoughts on this scene?
I immediately thought something was off or had to be off, because that car crash was, no one's walking out of that the way she walked out of it. So immediately I was on alert for, she's dead. Well, she didn't make it out of this. This isn't real. This isn't actually happening. And there's just a slightly off quality to everything that happens in the film. But that was my immediate reaction to this, was all is not as it seems here.
It's dreamy.
Yeah. I didn't feel that way. I only because I think there's just an off quality to sort of everything. So it didn't seem particularly unusual to me. I did think about just the drag racers or party racers. I don't know what it is.
Those crazy guys.
Like who they were, where they were going, what happened to. I mean, obviously they're dead. It wasn't clear if both cars were involved. But I really love shortly after the cops arrive.
Yeah.
There's a bit of dialogue I just really loved, which I just thought was excellent characterization, where this one cop is holding a bag or something, and he says like, "We found this in the back of the caddy," and the other one just goes like, "You told me that already." It's just instantly told me about their relationship and about this. He just made that guy out to look like a fool, and I thought they were going to be quite important characters, or I thought we would be following them investigating this car crash at least more than we actually did, which is, it really sort of typifies this movie in a way, like these quite special moments you have, and certainly special scenes. I know we're going to come on to the Winkies one probably imminently.
Yeah, the Winkies
and it's
one
like,
is next.
holy shit, this scene's big, or this thing's important, and then it's just like, that's gone now.
I don't even remember those two characters.
Yeah, they just stood investigating the car crash after it's happened, and just have a little kind of chat. And that's pretty much their time in the movie, as far as I recall.
It is. It's the only time they appear, and there is a kind of a reason for it, and that the lead detective is Robert Forster, who is, we were just talking about Jackie Brown, because it was the other movie that I watched when I was in Los Angeles, he's the male kind of lead in Jackie Brown, and he's like a big name, and he wouldn't be in this film just for that. And this is we haven't really talked about the making of Mulholland Drive, but in a way, you guys both enjoyed it so much. It's kind of like, you don't need, you know what I mean? It's like the movie's the movie, but at the same time, it is interesting that it was made as, especially because we just watched Twin Peaks. It's why I chose to do Mulholland Drive and skip out Fire Walk with Me and Lost Highway. Twin Peaks was a TV show that became a movie, and Mulholland Drive was a TV pilot, which ABC, the same network, actually turned down. So they were going to be recurring characters. And Robert Forster actually had the role of Harry Truman in the original Twin Peaks.
Oh, no way.
And there was a scheduling clash and he couldn't do it. So I can't remember, what's his name? Michael Ontkeen, I think his name is, became Harry Truman. And then in Twin Peaks: The Return, the original Harry Truman had retired. So Robert Forster plays his brother in Twin Peaks. So he does come back and do that role. And it's interesting that he didn't, in a way, he not only missed out on the original Twin Peaks, but then he missed out on this role because ABC turned down the pilot, and then there was a 2-year gap. And during that 2-year gap, Studio Canal came to Lynch and said, "Do you have anything you want? Is there anything you want to do?" Or I think the president said, "We've heard that you made a pilot. I've seen it because there were pirate copies of it going around. And would you like to make it into a standalone movie and we can release it?" And Lynch was like, similar to we discussed before, he's kind of like, I don't have any ideas for that. I'll have a think. And he meditated, and all the ideas came to him at once. And he was like, I'm going to be able to wrap this up in a ball. And so lots of what we see in the film is just from the pilot, but with new sections and a little bit reorganized.
Wow, that's incredible. So I do remember you saying that this was a pilot for a TV show that became a movie. And was the TV show going to be kind of centered around those guys, or just they would be recurring characters?
They would be investigating. I think the Who is that lady was going to be the Who Killed Laura Palmer of Mulholland Drive. And I think this time he had even fewer intentions to reveal the answer. And in a way, it's kind of like, again, he does give the answer in this film, and the answer is inexplicable.
Yes, that's right.
Who's this lady? Well, she could be 2 or 3 different people, and none of them actually make any sense. But yes, the next scene is the scene at Winkies.
I just wanted to come here.
To Winkies?
This Winkies.
Okay. Why this Winkies?
It's kind of embarrassing.
Go ahead.
I had a dream about this place.
Oh, boy.
See what I mean?
I don't understand who those guys are. No. I don't know what their relationship is with each other.
No.
The thing that I wanted to say more than anything, that there is, like Rob said, there's this strange, anxious energy. But one of the things which I think Lynch is brilliant at, and he does it in Twin Peaks, we talked about it a little bit, in the scenes where Sarah Palmer especially is thinking about Laura and about the spaces in the house where she isn't anymore. There's that really famous shot of the fan, and there's that famous panning shot of Laura's bedroom. But there's when that guy says, I was here and you were here, and then you were up at the counter, and it's just got a shot of the counter with no one in it.
Yeah.
And it's fucking horrible.
Yeah.
And then a bit later on in the scene, that guy does stand there, and then the guy's like,
but that's
now my dream is happening.
It's incredible. I think that is incredible. The way that he describes the dream, and then it starts partly happening, I guess, or just that guy being there is suddenly terrifying. It's like, oh my God, he's there. And you said, and I wanted them to stop, they're going through the motions. They're walking down towards that alley, and I was just like, stop. Why are you going? You're living the dream. You're doing the dream. It's so, I remember we had I guess a bit of mailbag in the last episode, I think, where someone said Mulholland Drive's got one of the scariest scenes I've ever seen, and I was so hoping it was this one, because I was like, if it's scarier than this in this movie, I found it incredibly effective. Like it wasn't so scary I couldn't watch, but it's just dripping with like
it's like a fever dream anxiety to it.
It's so good. The guy Dan, the only character I think whose name we know is Dan. He's a striking gentleman. He's kind of unusual looking.
His eyes
got a
are quite far apart.
He's got a weird grin.
Yeah, he's so happy.
Yeah.
When he starts telling it, he's too happy.
And Rob mentioned the camera work, that sort of dreamy, floaty, over the shoulder, like, you know, you just don't see, it's not like handheld, you know, kind of like CNN Warzone stuff. It's like, it's clearly like supposed to be floaty. It's very
It constantly
stylized.
feels like there's something just out of frame that's there.
Yeah.
Haunting it, and you're not quite seeing it, especially when he's retelling the dream.
Yeah.
Like I constantly was expecting something to come into frame.
Yeah.
Or for there to be some kind of reveal, and there never quite was anything.
No.
Just prickle.
You have no, I think it's incredible because I have no knowledge of who those characters are, what their relationship is, why they're there. And it's still so effective. Like that really struck me. That I was like, I don't even know who these guys are. And I'm still like hanging on every word and every moment. Like, don't go there. Don't go down there. Why are you doing this?
There's a dream logic of when he describes, when it kind of gets, because he's just describing a dream, and then when he says, and I can see the man through the wall, and he's doing all this.
Yes.
And you're just like, oh, that's insane. Like, what does that mean? But it is the kind of, there's like a real kind of shorthand.
Yeah.
Yeah, like there's a dream logic to it.
You know exactly what it means in a way, but without being able to explain what it means at all.
It always really reminded me.
That's what dreams are like.
Yeah, it always really reminded me of the end of Silent Hill 2. You know, the dog ending. And
right.
And he just comes in and says, "You've been doing all this," and it's like the dog's just got all the levers. I always kind of think of the dog behind, but instead of the dog, I mean, that's the other thing is when they get around to the back of the garage or the bins or whatever it is. Just that little face pops out.
Yeah.
And it's kind of like, what? Like,
yes. Yeah. And also, like, I think it's worth saying that we've been to LA. You've just been. Yeah. And we have seen a lot of homeless people in LA. Mm. It's got a homeless problem. And I think there are homeless people in the UK. I see a lot of them too.
Yeah.
In LA, they're different. I feel like it's different there somehow. It seems a lot. It seems really bad to be homeless in LA.
Right.
And you know, like, I guess my point is just because if you haven't been, you might not know. Like, that guy kind of looks like a comedy monster. Yeah. Unless you realise that is actually just how some people are over there because they're just in such a terrible state.
I'm not sure they're that bad.
I don't know. There were some people under that bridge in Koreatown who
I went under that bridge.
Were scary.
And I was in an Uber, and I realised I was like, I'm under Rob's bridge.
Yeah.
What? Why my bridge?
You hated that bridge more.
I did. Well, we all hated the bridge.
I didn't love the bridge.
You couldn't see them through the walls, but you could smell them through the walls.
Then there's just a series of phone calls.
The phone calls?
Yeah, there's a series of phone calls, a network of mysterious interest. There is Michael J. Anderson from, he's the man from Another Place from Twin Peaks, episode 3, so the little guy in the red suit who dances. He is behind a glass screen.
You're right.
In a giant body.
Yes.
And then he makes a call, and it's picked up by someone you never see in a hotel room.
The back of their neck, isn't it, or something?
And then it goes to a man who has a phone on a wall with a light shining directly on the phone. It. And then it rings into a room which much later in the film we realise is Diane, a version of Betty's apartment.
Right.
Yes. But that rings off. It doesn't ring. But they seem to be trying to track down the woman who should have been killed but is missing from the beginning of the film.
Yes.
Not that any of that necessarily matters. I think the more important is just that there is a suggestion, or maybe it does matter, but like for me, what comes through is that there is a network of intention, or like there's a network of people doing a thing, and I don't know who they are. Shadowy network.
Just creepy behind the scenes people who want the thing to happen.
Exactly.
And who wanted her dead?
I think
it wasn't completely clear.
They wanted a specific woman to get a part in the movie.
Well, that becomes clear a bit later on. But from these phone calls, I wasn't sure whether they were looking for her because they had plotted to threaten her with this gun, you know, I suppose to kill her or whatever, or whether they were...
Well, I guess in my head, if they were the people who then later on would like another person to take that role, it might make sense that they were also the people who were trying to remove her in the first instance. Unless they were just people who had... I like the idea, which I guess we'll come on to when we come to those specific meetings with Adam Kesher, but I guess from the outside, someone being interested in movies, we're all interested in movies to this extent. When when you hear people say, oh, the studio did this, studio interference that, or how people become stars, and it's all slightly intangible and abstract. And then here is a film which kind of codifies or embodies it, represents that in this really specific, bizarre way, like a slightly absurdist way. But it's almost a perfect representation of what is like an intangible thing. Like people talk about, power structures in Hollywood. This is as good a representation of them as any, I think.
It made me feel very naive, actually. Especially the scene with Adam Kesher. Right. I was like, God, yeah, of course this happens. Of course people are forced into role, or
But I think again, to skip ahead, but I think that even in our work, when you deal, even like doing junkets or whatever, with people who are on different shows, or interviewing actors, even sometimes just interviewing 2 actors at once, and you'll get a sense from the representation, from the PR or the managers or whatever, that someone needs to be treated in a slightly different way.
Yeah.
And they won't just come out and say it. And there's, there's like that awkward, there's like a weird kind of game around it. And there is like an orbit around these kind of people. And no one, it's unstated. Where does it come from? When does it emerge? It's not always there at the beginning of their careers. Right. And there is it's basically like the dance of working with, and I'm using enormous inverted commas, but talent. And I feel like the atmosphere of these scenes, I think, is like just a spot on representation of what that's like to me. We should move along though. The next scene is Betty at LAX. This scene looks fucking terrible, I think. Yeah. It's so funny. Like, compared with the rest of the film is like shadowy and interesting.
Strange. Also, just a very obvious dub of Naomi Watts' dialogue as well, which was just not in keeping with the performance that she gives in the rest of the film.
Yeah.
Yes, and well, I'm not going to disagree with you. Apart from, I did just think that Betty. I was interesting because this is obviously the first time I see Betty and the first time I see Naomi Watts, and I was kind of like, oh, it's such a strange, even compared to what we've seen everyone else we've met so far in the movie. It felt like a weird performance somehow, and I guess part of that is the dub. But then later on, her performance is just unbelievable, I think. And she plays like so many different roles, actually, not even just like Betty and Diane, but within that, like several other kind of characters almost. But I felt like it was so, or at least not an accident. If it's partly because of the dub that it feels a certain way, I think that is what they were trying to achieve. Like this kind of, she feels different to everybody else and less, I don't know, less real almost, I suppose, which it feels a bit more likely in hindsight now, having seen but it's instantly just felt like a slightly jarring performance. And it's so cutesy and happy and smiley. And obviously he's having this like twee conversation with this old lady who is equally sort of smiley and
they're absurdly smiling in the back of the cab.
The back of the cab thing is just like, my God.
Before the cab, it just in terms of the performance, I absolutely agree. It seems in line with other bits of Lynch that we've seen, though. Just someone who is just completely like happy to the point of eeriness.
Yeah,
I think little bits of that in Blue Velvet right at the beginning. Quite a lot of that in Twin Peaks. And here, I think the dub, in my head, I was kind of like, the dubs probably happen just because you probably can't get good sound when you're in the pickup at LAX. But I think it does add to it. But yeah, the overexposure, like LAX is fucking horrible as well. If you go in there, it isn't a nice place. And so I thought there was something interesting about trying to, like, it looks all is overexposed and blown out. And it's
sort of like what you get when you first come out of LAX.
That's true.
The whole sky in LA is overexposed.
Yeah.
The pavement feels overexposed. It's like this real sort of like glaring mixture of sunlight and concrete that just like fries your eyes, doesn't it? And you step out of the shadow of the taxi pickup area and you're like,
yeah.
But God, it's funny, but like I remember the very first time that we did E3 together, and we were outside the convention center at like midday in July or June, and I never used to wear dark glasses ever, and it was the first time I bought some. It's just like, because you can't see otherwise.
No.
But it makes you realize why Hollywood, and if you go to like museums and whatever, or histories of Hollywood, they would talk about this really openly. But the reason that Hollywood is in California is because of the quality of the light. And less so with digital now, but like when you're working with literal film, light is just this incredible commodity. You literally need it, and it's part of like the industrial like resource, like the raw material of film is that light, which you get when you get hit with when you kind of come out of LAX.
I liked the little bit with the taxi driver as well. Again, just adding to this, like this is not real, or the unreality of it. Like, where are my bags? Oh, they've definitely been nicked. Like, no, they haven't. A friendly taxi driver's just assumed you want a lift. And just so weird.
Actually, had some nice taxi drivers in there last week.
There are some nice ones.
It's different on Uber though, because you're going to give them a star rating.
That's true.
So yes, then you get the old couple smiling.
Yeah,
and I think that that's just a hat tip to. I mean, this is classic Cinderella, like Hollywood stuff. It's a really, it's a super kind of cliched Hollywood story. Is the young regional wannabe actress comes to Hollywood and tries to become a star, and this version of it is so, as we've discussed, so ridiculously innocent until that moment. It's just like just plaster the smile on those people just for so long.
Yeah.
And they're looking out the window and they're smiling.
Yeah.
And they're looking back at each other and smiling. And again, it's just like, too much of a good thing obviously makes you realize it's probably not a good thing, but for no particular reason. After that, we go to Coco in the apartment building. Yeah. And this is an element of the film which I liked this time more than I think any other time, which was, again, I think probably now that I've been to LA more and more, and there's a sense of Hollywood that there's a really grounded sense, like behind all of the kind of the star stuff and the studio stuff and the stuff with Adam, the director, there's just like, what is Hollywood actually like to live in? And like that, the stuff in the Hollywood Hills and it being a little bit different to being down in LA proper, it reminds me of that. And also just that if you spend any time in Hollywood or West Hollywood especially, and on Sunset Boulevard, you will see loads of people who are obviously used to work in movies and are kind of retired or semi-retired, basically like really made up women in their 60s and 70s walking their tiny fucking dogs. And Coco has got that vibe. But just the idea of like, what's the actual community of Hollywood like? And it is like this. It is like sort of semi-retirement or retirement apartment blocks. And also how many like there's a real kind of Spanish speaking undercurrent within all of Mulholland Drive, the movie. And when you go to LA, like that's everywhere, like not just the service industries, but just, like everyone you see like people doing like gardens or construction work, like all of them are kind of Mexican American. And you don't see that in loads of tales of Hollywood. And it's just like, it's not like super pronounced, but it's a real kind of undercurrent. And it goes into the theatre scene, which you were kind of mentioning earlier on, but also and this is my kind of naivety, Laura Elena Herring, who plays Rita in the film, the first time I watched it, I didn't realize that she was Mexican American or Latina at all. But her accent is incredibly, in the same way that I never realized when I first watched Wrath of Khan that Khan was Ricardo Montalban. But just like that, there's like a Spanish kind of intonation in the pronunciation of everything. There's that, and I got that from Coco in her apartment. But there's
also in the architecture, I think you do get to see a little bit in that apartment, but also in Diane's kind of complex where she lives,
right?
Which again is a part of LA in the suburbs a bit more. You do get to see that the influence of that sort of Latin architecture. Yeah,
it's a real distinctive look to all of where people actually live in LA. It's not obvious when you get there where people actually fucking live, because it's all just vape stores and fucking CVS and Target. It's a very strange place. There was in the apartment building a dog shit, which was a big point of contention with the when this was going to be a TV pilot. Apparently they had like loads of discussions about Lynch wanted to go really close on the dog shit because he just thinks dog shit's funny, and they were like, can we zoom out of the dog shit? I thought it was quite tastefully done. But there is that quite funny line that she's got about a kangaroo.
Yes.
Someone used to keep a kangaroo.
Yeah. A prize kangaroo, I believe.
And I liked Coco seems knowing. I could see how she'd have operated in a TV show as this kind of slightly wiser. She gives her a few warnings sometimes. She kind of knows what's going on. And she's like a nice foil to Betty as this like very naive character. Although as we discover gradually, like Betty has... And I'm taking Betty kind of at face value.
Yeah.
I don't really think about her as potentially like a dream version of someone who's lying dead somewhere in an apartment somewhere or anything like that. Just take her at face value. I really, really like her character. And she meets the unnamed limo survivor who eventually reveals her name or takes the name Rita, appropriately enough after like a poster of a classic Hollywood star.
Yeah.
Rita Hayworth. And then we meet Adam Kesher. So any thoughts on that meeting? There's like a boy... I guess one of the things I really liked about it is that in a similar way to Blue Velvet, I think Mulholland Drive has got like genuine, intriguing plot. And it's, those two ladies getting together and you instantly know she's going to have to find out at some point that Rita shouldn't be there. And also then they're going to try and work out what's happening to her. And I remember the very first time I watched this, that was, as much as all the abstractions are beautiful and interesting and very unusual, having that plot as a balance is the thing which pulled me through the movie the first time. So having watched it once, I don't know how you guys felt. Were you invested in that, or how did it hit you? Yeah,
I was invested in it, and I thought, okay, here is the mystery of the movie. I thought it's, very strange. Like how has she ended up in this apartment? Again, I was like, something's not right here. Why is she in this apartment? And why is Betty seemingly nonplussed that like a mysterious naked woman is just in her shower?
Yeah.
And just very kindly is like, oh, well, let's help you find out who you are and where you came from. Let's do it together. I'll hide you in this apartment. You can stay here. It's fine.
She's just got that out of town niceness.
Even when her aunt is like, phone the police.
She's
like, I'm not going to do that. I think it's okay. She's nice. Trust me, she's nice. It's just a big misunderstanding.
She is nice.
Yeah, I mean, there is... I found the mystery massively compelling, and then going into the Adam Kesher scene, obviously started to try to put these things together. Oh, okay, he's casting for a movie. They specifically want it to be this woman. An actor from out of town has just come in. This other attractive woman was in a limo at the start. It's all the pieces are there, and you start putting them together in different ways.
It was one of the things which I remembered actually when I rewatched this time was not just that mix of there is somebody missing and then you see him looking for somebody is what you just said. That there's an out of town, and the Cinderella narrative is that Betty will meet Adam. Adam will realize that she's incredible, and then that will be. And what actually happens, skipping quite a long way ahead, is he is in his now resigned form, looking at the actresses that the shadowy forces would like him to cast, and he turns around twice and sees Betty, and there's an obvious connection. And I remember watching it thinking that the power of the rightness of that connection is going to undo this seemingly inevitable power move.
Yeah.
And everything will be righted again.
Yes.
And it just doesn't happen. She just runs away.
Yeah.
It's fucking brilliant. But the scene which we're on now is Adam in a meeting with the production company, his agent, and then...
the bad boys.
Yeah.
I thought this was great.
May I offer you gentlemen anything?
Espresso. Nothing. What's the photo for?
One espresso. No, that's it. I think you're going to enjoy your espresso this time. I've done quite a bit of research, knowing how hard you are to please. This one comes highly recommended.
What's the photo for? It's a recommendation.
A recommendation to you, Adam.
It's not a recommendation. This is the girl. What girl? For what? What is this, Ray?
It's
just
a great
the
scene.
horrible. Just how can we convey that this man is horrible? And he asks, "Where's my?" Just really quiet. You can't hear him. You have to work out his dialogue through what the waiter says.
Yeah.
Napkin.
Yeah.
Of course, sir. And he just takes a sip of coffee and then just retches it out into this napkin.
It just puts his tongue out of his mouth. It's
I don't
so
even
good.
know why it's good. Just like this
horrible,
really jarring mix of the napkin, which represents like order and etiquette, and then this grotesque retching of the coffee into it, like he's some kind of devil may cry boss, like with a demon bubbling away under his skin. And just the way he looks at Adam Kesher is like, you will be casting this woman in your film.
What I love about the
Look, this
coffee
is the girl.
retching is the two guys, so not Adam and his agent, but the other two guys who are working for the production agency, Ryan Entertainment or whatever it's called, and it's their horror. And they're not horrified at this disgusting thing. They're horrified that they've got it wrong. Like,
Yes.
oh my God, no. It's so good.
It's great. I mean, it's funny. It's just funny. It's funny in so many ways. And again, really scary. I mean, it's a scary meeting. It's funny that the espresso was built up as such a big thing. I thought way too much about the waiter being terrified of coming in, and like you said, he's whispering napkin. He's like, oh yes, it's like just his day, like what a day he's had. Those two guys waiting, and the guy, he asked for a napkin. I suppose because he's very prepared. Like, if I don't like it,
I'm gonna yak.
You know what's gonna happen.
I'm yakking. Do you know who those two guys are?
Is in World?
Yeah, so they're in World they're the Castellani brothers.
Yes, and but I mean I don't entirely know.
But I meant
means.
who do you know who the actors are?
No.
Well, one of them we've seen, Dan Hedaya, who was he's in Alien Resurrection.
Wow,
as the station captain or general.
No way.
Yeah, I can't believe you guys didn't remember that. And the other guy is Angelo Badalamenti.
Oh, no way.
Who's the guy who yaks the coffee.
Is it? That's Angelo Badalamenti? Yeah. Wow.
Who's he?
He's written all the music.
He's the composer.
For
really?
For everything that,
wow.
for Blue Velvet. And
That's fantastic. My God, he's so good.
He's so good.
He's so good.
He's from New Jersey. Maybe that helps.
This is the girl. I love that it just repeats that line. That's it. I
think it's reduced to... It like I was saying, it's like the whole idea of, where to start, who makes stars, who makes these decisions. And it's got like this really old, like it's a very modern movie, but it's got this sense of Hollywood, like being up in the hills, Coco being there, of like the tradition of Hollywood that's really, really old school, back to like contract players in the golden era and like people being made as stars. And like the sense that you get from gossip magazines of, the drugs and the publicity and the exploitation that would go on behind that, all of that is just reduced to that like headshot and like, this is the girl. It's such a good line.
Also, there's just like there's a vulgarity about him, the coffee retching man.
Yeah.
And like a disgustingness and he's so intimidating. Like that's exactly the kind of man I would not want to be in a meeting with. And obviously this is long before Harvey Weinstein was outed as the monster that he is.
Yeah.
But like, I often think like how many, it's been told, it was common knowledge in the movie industry, or a lot of people knew what a absolute monster he was. And since then I've often thought, are there any sort of like little subtle call outs to him?
Right.
Could this be one?
Do you know, I think even if it's not that specifically, you're so bang on about this being a nod to how just an industry which will not reject those people if those people have power or are making money or are, where does power come from in Hollywood anyway? It normally comes from money. But yeah, just that those people get to do that thing. And you see every week we were talking about, let's not name names because I don't want to get sued by anybody, but like we were talking about, there's that TV chef recently who was like in trouble for just throwing his weight around. And why are these things allowed to happen? This is just an example of it. What it made me think, and not Adam Kesher is obviously David Lynch in some form. He's an analog, and it's that classic thing of he's got his shirt done all the way up to the top. He's got like the hair. And I love Justin Theroux. Actually, he pronounces it Thoreau, which I only know because Louis Theroux, who is his cousin, talks about it and how they pronounce their names differently.
Right.
But I really like his performance because he's more grounded. He's like the person in a Lynch film who is most like, why the fuck am I in a Lynch film?
Right.
Like his reactions are often like, what is going on?
Yes.
And in this scene, he's like, what are we talking about?
Yes.
I'm casting this fucking movie, which is so good.
I think it's, you can't escape. I always find it interesting when you see a movie about movie making, and this is maybe even more interesting where, you know, a famous director with a character who is a director in a movie. That is just interesting to watch. Like, obviously, it's immediately like, what's he trying to say here? Is he talking about himself? Is he? And I just enjoy that Kesher is the kind of, I guess, what you hope for in a director, in as much as he's fighting for his vision. You know, whatever that is. I don't know what he's looking for exactly.
He's a bratty asshole.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, in the next bit, I like laughed out loud at the way he runs back to his car after smashing up their limo.
Yeah,
like it's so good.
What I was going to say though was I do think he looks like Lynch, and Lynch must have been aware of that. Actually, on set, he wears those Sony headphones. If you ever see any pictures of Lynch on set, he's got exactly those headphones on. And I don't think it's anything as simple as he's going to think all the same things that I have thought in my career. But, you know, Lynch talks about Dune as this experience where he didn't have final cut, and it was like, he talks about how awful it was. He said it was like death. He just talks about it like I was dying for 2 years.
Yeah.
It was awful. And then how he always had final cut afterwards. He would never work without it. This is an experience of a director losing that control. So I like whether, you know, I won't enter into like deep and meaningfuls about like what Lynch meant in his movies most of the time, but in this instance I think it's a fairly direct, he's talking from the experience or that it must be somewhere in the thinking of this scene, and it's impossible not to think that Dino De Laurentiis was the direct, like this larger than life Italian man was the producer on Dune, and then I think they got on well and worked, you know, on Blue Velvet and other things, but I also think there are elements of Dino De Laurentiis in the people who are on the other side of the table. Smashes up a car. Yeah. Very funny. Runs back towards his car, as you said. Yeah. Then he goes home to an incredible house. Yeah. In the Hollywood Hills, and Billy Ray fucking Cyrus is there in bed with his wife.
But is it his home? Because that's what she was. I love how outraged she is at him for being there. She's like furious that why are you here? Yeah. And like kind of kicks him out of, I assumed, you know, their home, but then she does it in such a way that it feels like it's actually her home. That
I think it's just the unreasonableness of it, right? Which is the comedy of the scene.
Yeah. It's I mean, it is a really funny scene because I think just because how angry she is at him, and I love his calm reaction to like what shade of paint would be best for this, and then that it's just he's just covered in paint for the rest of the movie, or you know, for the rest of that day is
I love it. It's so good on his beautiful black suit, very cool, very chic 90s suit.
And Billy Ray Cyrus, you know, you see his van outside. I can't remember what it's called.
Pool.
Right, exactly. It's just, I guess it's just insult to injury that I suppose that
he's so reasonable.
This guy's like
I'm
Adam Kesher. I'm a famous Hollywood actor casting my next big blockbuster. I live in this amazing house, and my wife's cheating on me with the pool guy who's just massive.
But I also like that he seems like a nice guy.
He is a nice guy.
He's like, hey, he's had a hard time. So I've only just got, I can't remember exactly what's written on his van, but it is some kind of joke on Gene Pool, isn't it? His name is Gene.
I think it is Gene, yeah. And I didn't get that until you just said it then either. Gene Pool.
That's a very Lynchian joke if that is true.
Have we skipped the Hitman scene? Because
it's difficult because they're intercut.
Yeah.
So we haven't skipped it. Why not talk about it now? Talking about comedy, I guess.
Yeah, and
it's funny you should mention Hitman because it made me think of the video game Hitman.
Really?
And how I play it. Where you're just like, I need to kill you. Oh crap, someone else has heard. Yeah. I'm gonna have to kill you as well. Who are you? All right.
Yeah,
and you just end up with
a
room full of corpses.
Yeah.
And like a distraction. And here it's the vacuum cleaner just going off.
It was another of those brilliant, which I think I'm coming to understand as being like a Lynchian thing, that just that clash of comedy and seriousness.
Yeah.
Like it is, again, it's still quite a tense scene, I suppose. But then when that lady gets shot through the wall, that's just so funny. And her reaction when she said, like, been bit by something big or something like it's just like so funny.
He's got her in a chokehold, dragging her back into that room.
Yeah.
Their fight is amazing.
Yeah.
When she's like, there is, again, it's like funny, but not.
Yeah.
Like, I do think that there is an unfortunate humor being played out of the scene of just, this is a large woman.
Right.
But
yeah.
also, she's a fighter.
Yeah,
she's like
absolutely.
beating the crap out of him. Oh.
And then the guy with the vacuum cleaner who's just like, I don't know what he thinks about any of it.
There's a beginning, he's like, oh, fuck's sake. You know, he just doesn't want to get involved.
And then shooting the vacuum and it catching on fire and causing a fire. It's just like, this guy can't get a break.
He really fucking lines up the shot of the vacuum cleaner as well. It's like, and pop. Oh,
it's just a great scene. And again, like, I was expecting him to be a big part of this movie. I mean, he does have a part in this movie, and like what he's stealing from that guy, the black book of like it's said as like, you know, the who's who of everyone in the world or something in this black book. I was like, what is this? This is exciting.
There's I think that the fans talk about how this is they have a whole kind of imagined or slightly extrapolated idea that Diane was involved in some kind of like high class prostitution ring,
right?
And that this guy might have been running it, and therefore, but either way, it seems like the hitman guy is trying to track down for Mr. Roke or whatever his name is, the guy in the wheelchair.
Yeah,
he's trying to track down Rita, and this is step number one.
Yeah, I'll start here.
Yeah. Well, what it all means in the grand scheme of things, who can say?
But it's just another, I mean, and this is the thing about this movie in particular, I think. And I guess it's that it is the kind of salve to the, maybe you won't ever find out exactly what's going, it doesn't all have a neat, this is what's happening. It's just a series of amazing scenes.
Yeah.
Not every scene is amazing, but there are so many, and they can just stand alone as just, I mean, it basically just stands alone. You drop in, I don't know who those characters are, what their relationship is. This thing happens. I really enjoyed it. It's basically not really part of the movie anymore, and it doesn't matter. It could almost not be in the movie at all, and I don't, you wouldn't have lost anything from a story point of view, certainly.
It is interesting to go, when he was sat in his chair thinking about everything, losing some stuff from the pilot, shooting some, why he was like, and obviously I'm going to keep that scene.
Yeah.
The hitman and the vacuum cleaner, that's really important.
He was going to be a big part of the TV series.
I think he probably was.
Yeah, he probably was.
In terms of, I lost the thread of the chronology a tiny bit, but Adam, once he takes revenge on the Castiglione brothers, not a good moment for him. He checks into a dive motel downtown.
Yeah,
we've probably stayed in places worse than that in LA with Cookie, and then his credit is gone, and then he speaks to, I like the logic of his phone call with his assistant, and it's just a great kind of just intriguing, mysterious noir feel to the bank says you're broke. I'm not broke, I know, but you're broke, and it's kind of like, yeah, that's just the rules of this world. And then he has to meet with the cowboy, back up in the Hollywood Hills, a ranch there. Did you guys enjoy the cowboy?
I really liked the cowboy. I can't remember anything that he said other than the last bit, which was, if you see me once more, you've done well. If you see me twice, you've done poorly.
Oh, I was trying to unravel that for so long. I was like, what's that mean? What would that be
you
like?
know how many times we see him?
Twice.
We see him 2 more times.
Really?
Yeah. What does that mean?
But he does it well. He does well. But he does
Adam
well. He does
everything
he
says. But then
Adam sees him once, I think, doesn't he? I can't remember actually.
I'm not sure.
My memory's hazy on it.
Yeah.
But I liked by that point, I was just like, oh, another quite creepy, weird bit. Let's just enjoy being creeped out by him.
Howdy.
Howdy to you.
Beautiful evening.
Yeah.
Just want to thank you for coming all the way up here to see me from that nice hotel downtown.
No problem. What's on your mind?
Well, now, here's a man who wants to get right down to it. Kind of anxious to get to it, are you?
Whatever.
Man's attitude goes some ways, the way his life will be. Is that something you might agree with?
I know we spoke about No Country for Old Men recently, but it had a slight Javier Bardem in that gas station scene about it. You know, this I really in the dialogue
he's implacable.
About one character really knows what's going on and one character really doesn't have a clue what's going on, and just the way the conversation goes, I really appreciated are you saying that because you think that's what I want to hear, or are you saying that because that's what you really believe? And the way he questions him, what did I even say? And he heard what he had said. It's a really interesting
dynamic.
Yeah.
Well, like I said, I feel like it's great, really refreshing to see a skeptic in a David Lynch film.
Right.
Being like in the motel, he was like, the cowboy? I'm going to see the cowboy.
Right,
and then he's like,
yes.
All right. Okay, I guess I'm going to see the cowboy.
In a corral. Okay,
in a fucking corral. Oh, it's so good. And the stuff I like about the cowboy is he appears out of nowhere, or he seems to be delivered by a lamp, which I really like. And there is this whole ongoing thing in Lynch movies about electricity and about things being transferred by energy. And I just watched, before I watched this, I'd gone to see Twin Peaks Fire Walk with Me at a screening in LA, and I didn't really enjoy it. And I guess you haven't. There's an order of beings in the film which are not humans, and they. I'm going to say this out loud. And they all live above a convenience store. There's a room where they all inhabit, and they seem to be delivered by telephone wires, or at least there are several characters who look at telephone wires during the film, and like echoes of the noises that these characters are making are there. Anyway, and so this is a very kind of direct continuation of that, is that he looks at the light comes on, and then the cowboy is there. And also at the end of the scene, there's something. It just happens in the cut, and it reminds me of the space and the use of space in that scene in Winkies, where the cowboy turns around and walks away. And then you look at Adam, and then Adam looks back, and then there's nothing there because the light's turned off.
Yeah.
And then you look back at Adam, and he's like slightly shocked. And it's kind of like, well, where, there isn't like a moment of it dissolving. It's like one moment it's there and one time it's not. And then you look at it, and it's almost like it's something, it's so simple, but there is something, again, dreamlike and vanishing about it. It's super interesting. But also just the idea that, in a film which is dealing with the unknowable forces of Hollywood, that you would meet a representative of the mythic era of Hollywood, fucking Cowboy, and he is a representative talking for that system. Of course, it makes complete symbolic sense. What happens? Yeah, there's my Hitman notes. Betty realizing the truth about Rita. We've already kind of discussed this. Then they decide to go on an adventure, and they have some actual plot. They call the police. That's quite fun. She's so happy that she's done this. Again, it's kind of from that position of that kind of Girl Scout like naivety, just calling the police and being like, yeah, I've done it. There was an accident. And I'm sort of into that on its own, like, not ironically, like it's just enjoyable when all this other horrible shit's going on. That's just,
that is the power of Betty, I think, as a character, is she makes things like that possible and enjoyable and nice. Yeah. Because she's nice. And it is the out of town goodness, not jaded, not part of that world, and has a different perspective. I didn't even know you could phone the police to ask them if there's been an accident in a place. I didn't think they would give you that information. Maybe they don't. Maybe it's just in a movie. But I don't know. I just enjoyed her practicality. And I think that's the first time, maybe it's not, that we go back to Winkies, and it's incredible. Winkies has this power because of that opening scene, or that first scene that we're there. Every time we're there, I'm like, what's going to happen? This is a bad place. I mean, get out of Winkies. It's a bad place for people to be. And that's just interesting as well. It was just like, really affected me every time I sort of shuffled forward in my seat every time there was a scene at Winkies.
Random scene next where a giant man goes to Adam's house and punches everyone.
Oh, I enjoyed that. That was great.
Whilst he's also he just won't not keep shouting for Adam. It's
He's
so
unstoppable.
weird. He is huge. Billy Ray Cyrus gives him a good go.
Well, Billy Ray,
or he just tries.
He's swatted away.
He's not intimidated, but perhaps should be.
Yeah, he doesn't. He's just unstoppable. Giant man. I love that. Then we're back at Betty's apartment with again, I can see it working in a TV show, but it works here really well as well, where there's just a kind of a classic touch of the supernatural with the knock on the door. Is it Bonnie? Is that the character? And she's just saying stuff, which is kind of a Lynchian trick where he will often have people saying things which the characters don't quite understand, but we kind of intuit slightly more. And she says, you're not supposed to be here. Yeah. And you're just kind of like, there is somebody who shouldn't be in this apartment, so that's interesting. And then it's like there's someone in trouble here, and you think that it's talking about Rita, but maybe we learn, later, taking in the film as a whole, maybe it is talking about Betty. And then Bonnie talks about someone in her apartment telling her something, which is, it's just got this kind of Chinese whispers idea of like secret kind of truths being passed down the line. Just like, no, that's not what she said. She said this. And then it's kind of like even makes you take a step forward into like, well, what? What do you mean? There's a brilliant scene in Fire Walk With Me with David Bowie, of course.
Oh, wow.
He just, it's really difficult to explain if you're not watching the film. And even if you are watching the film, he just walks into an FBI meeting with Dale and Gordon. And Gordon's like, this is a long-lost FBI agent that you've never met, everybody, and he's been missing for 2 years, and he's here now. What's going on? And David Bowie just says, we're not going to talk about Judy. We're not going to talk about Judy at all. And then he looks at Dale and says, who do you think this is? And then he disappears. It's fucking brilliant.
Oh, God.
Anyway, this scene reminds me a little bit of that. And it's the same trick of just, like, dropping information from out of nowhere.
Yeah.
Oh, I love it so much. I've been having such a great few weeks, everybody.
I think it's nice as well. It gives Coco a little bit more of an opportunity to come and save the day for Betty as well, and just reinforce her as like,
she's so good.
Yeah.
And like you said, there's when she realizes, which is the next scene, because Betty goes to her audition, and just before she goes, I think Coco talks to her and says, I don't know what's going on. And she says, you've just told me a load of shit.
Right.
And I don't know what's going on, but I trust you to deal with it. Which I thought was just, and it kind of gives this bounds around which an adventure is able to happen. It's kind of like someone just saying, look, sort this out. Here's your boundary.
Yes.
And then it's just more exciting.
I think I've realised I made a mental note at the time of just, I don't know what's going on, but I trust you to deal with it.
Yeah.
I was like, oh man, that's such a powerful thing to say to someone. Like, I'm trusting you to deal with this.
Yeah, exactly.
I'm going to remember that. It was good. She's such a good figure for Betty.
Rob, do you want to talk us through the audition scene? From your point of view, from practicing in the kitchen to the scene itself.
Yeah, I thought that was a remarkable contrast, because you've got Betty practicing in the kitchen with Rita, and you're like, oh, Betty's a great actor.
Yes.
Well done, Betty.
Especially compared to Rita, who is apparently a film star.
I always think it's remarkable when an actor has to play someone who isn't an actor, helping an actor read their lines, how good they managed to do it.
You're still here?
I came back. I thought that's what you wanted.
Nobody wants you here.
Really?
My parents are right upstairs. They think you've left.
So, surprise.
I can call them. I can call my dad.
But you won't.
If you're trying to blackmail me, it's not gonna work. You're playing a dangerous game here.
You know what I want. It's not that difficult.
Get out. Get out before I call my dad. He trusts you. You're his best friend. This will be the end of everything.
What about you? What will your dad think about you?
Stop! Just stop it. That's what you said from the beginning. Now, if I tell what happened, they'll arrest you and put you in jail. So get out of here before...
Before what?
Before I kill you.
Then they put you in jail.
Then I cry. And then I say with big emotion, I hate you! I hate us both! Such a lame scene.
But you are really good.
Thank you, darling.
So we get that scene, and then we go to the real audition. It's very uncomfortable, especially in the modern day when we've learned a lot more about how this kind of thing is probably commonplace, where like a really sort of lecherous person who's going to be deciding or has a lot of power over whether or not Betty is going to get the part wants to do the scene with her, and it's a very
let's do it close.
It's a very intimate, awkward, harassing scene for Betty, distressing for her to do, but she performs it amazingly, to the extent where I was like, holy shit, it's almost like a comment on, okay, you really get a sense. It's sort of like David Lynch showing off a little bit. It's like, here are the words written down in the script, and you've seen them performed this way in the kitchen. How else could you possibly do this scene? Obviously, Betty is angry. And then she performs the scene with, obviously, the horrible, lecherous man who just obviously wants to get in there and kiss all of the actresses that are coming in auditioning for the part. But the way in which the scene plays out is so different and powerful to what we saw in the kitchen that I was both appalled and also incredibly impressed at the same time. I thought it was, a remarkable scene. Again, there's the oddness of everyone just being there, the casting director being
there's
there.
So many people
everyone's there.
Yeah.
So again, it's like a comment on filmmaking, a comment, I guess, on the intense pressure that actors, especially female actors, will have to go through when they're trying to land a part, the shit that they have to deal with. But also there's that strange offness in the scene where everyone's so pleased with Betty. Like the old guy who's like, oh, that was just amazing. The casting director was like, I'm going to go and introduce you to another director friend of mine now. Like, everyone's there for Betty. Everyone's like, oh, well done, Betty. You're fantastic. It's amazing.
You get the kind of bullshit at the beginning and then a different reaction afterwards. I remember that at university, I was in my third year, I think, when this came out, and this was the scene which our like the head of film in the English department at Sheffield was like, go and see the film because of this. Like, if nothing else, because of this scene. This scene is unreal, and it's true. And I think that the first time I saw it, just the contrast between her acting the scene and also how unseriously she's taking the material when she's doing it with Rita. She kind of laughs with Rita at the end, and she's like, then I cry, and it gets overblown and big finish. And then like you said, the difference in quality and eroticism and tone in the audition itself. And you kind of, on the one hand, you're kind of thinking, holy shit, Betty could become a star. This is incredible. Also, I think impossible not to think Naomi Watts, and this is her first big role ever. This, I don't think it's a massive exaggeration to say this scene is maybe why she's like a Hollywood star. You can't help but noticing that. But then for the first time this time, which maybe I'm an idiot, or maybe we're in a really different moment in terms of awareness, like you said, about things like intimacy coordinators being on scene and being post Me Too. And I think that this scene anticipates all of that and is the right side of all of this as well. But then later on in the film, there are suggestions when the switch happens and it's more about Diane watching other actresses be successful and she's frustrated, and Rita, who is Camilla in this other version, seems to just be successful because she's with Adam. And I guess this time I watched this scene and I thought, what Betty is, what was maybe being projected back from, that rejected actress later on, but also just within this scene, the reason that she's succeeding is, I always read it as a triumph, like she's holding her own in this room. And I think this time maybe I watched it and thought it's actually doubly damning because she's only able to hold her own in this room because she has within her this extraordinary ability to be sexually charismatic and powerful. But that's the only reason she's being valued in this room. So in a way, it's kind of like, I don't know, It was just another layer of devastation, I guess, or in a way, or just a different way of. It wasn't wholly. Before I was like, Betty has smashed it, and she smashed that room, and now I'm kind of like, she's only able to succeed on the terms that they wanted to succeed on anyway.
Yeah, it's tricky, but in as much as it's so hard to separate that from just it being an incredible performance, because it is both. It is an incredible performance, and also like, you know,
but not just from Betty, from Naomi Watts as well.
Oh
like,
yeah,
there's so many layers of how good the performance is,
and that's what I kind of wanted to talk about earlier. You know, when we said when Betty first arrives, and I was kind of like, oh, it's Naomi Watts, but it's a bit. I don't know. It's a bit off. Her performance just a bit fine, isn't it? Is it the dub, or is it just? And so I think it's incredible. It's an incredible kind of rug pull, really, is to see Naomi Watts as the film goes on. She just gets better and better and better and does more and more incredible things. But I thought that
is interesting.
This scene was great, especially because of the kitchen scene. And it feels like, you know, like we are all movie-going audiences, or we know stories like, as you said, a young out-of-town woman comes to Hollywood with dreams of making it. She is either going to be terrible,
right,
or brilliant. And if we didn't have the kitchen scene, it would just be like, turns out she's brilliant. Excellent. But the kitchen scene, I feel like, gives you this, it relieves that pressure. You go, oh, she is, because it's good. She's good. In the kitchen scene, she's brilliant. You go, oh, great, she's brilliant. So then it's like, oh, she's either going to go to this audition and be brilliant, and they won't, you know, like there's, what's the kind of twist? She'll go and she'll do that scene again, and they won't like it. They won't give her the time of day, or she'll do it again and she'll get the part, and that would be a bit kind of disappointing. At no point did I consider that she will do a completely different read, and like Rob said, it is almost showing off, really, to show the way that a scene can be written and performed in a completely different way.
The confidence to know among the team who actually made this film that they have that other level there is pretty extraordinary, or that Naomi Watts had that other level there.
Yeah.
But I guess what you've said is you're right, and you've just made me think, you know, really the crucial thing just in terms of the effect of this scene is not just that you're right, it's kind of this binary thing. She's like the narrative of this person and where she's from, it's either going to be slightly disappointing and it's going to be a setback or a success, but the terms of the success are so out of bounds and out of reference from everything that we know about this person and that kind of narrative that it kind of collapses it, which is what makes it so powerful.
I also really enjoyed just afterwards that, again, the kind of fickleness of Hollywood and stuff, just when they're just walking away and she's just like, it's a shame that'll never get made. It's like just bursting her dream, like she's just done this amazing audition, everyone in the room is like, holy shit, you're a star, this is it, and then immediately just like, it's not actually going to happen though. It's a shame that won't happen, but anyway,
but also everyone being fucking horrible to each other and them having been married, it's perfectly Hollywood.
It's great.
Also, well, two other things, just that there is also in the kitchen scene, there are 3 lines where they let it play as if it's a real scene. It's like, you came back, oh, I thought you wanted me to,
right?
And then the camera moves back and you see she's holding a script, and right. So that I think has a tie-in with the Club Silencio scene later, or just that theme in general of performance,
right,
and layers of performance. But the other thing is just the fucking director, man. He's so funny. He says everyone in the room seems to have an opinion, and they're kind of like, you got any words, director guy? And he's just like, make it real, or whatever. And then at the end, everyone's like, holy shit, that was amazing. And then they got, what about, if you got anything to say? And he says, it was, what did he say?
Obviously it was a little forced, or
I think,
like
but
that.
He says twice, he says, very good.
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah, really.
It reminds me of a story that Peter Serafinowicz tells when George Lucas had him doing the voice for Darth Maul, where he's just like, all he said was, can you make him really evil?
Yeah.
Make him sound real evil.
Real evil.
Yeah. That was like the whole direction.
So I did my evil voice.
Yeah. That was it. You got the part. Yeah. It's, and again, I suppose it's especially enjoyable seeing a director being portrayed by a famous director, and that eye roll of that kind of nonsense. Just like that.
I guess it is funny that the director is the only person in that scene who is completely useless.
Yes.
That's quite a smart thing. Betty and Rita then track down Diane.
Yeah.
why did they get onto the idea of Diane?
Because they're
in
Winkies,
They're in Winkies.
and they see Diane,
on a name
the
badge.
waitress, has her name tag, Diane.
They
on it.
remember Diane Selwyn.
Evil Winkies.
And they have a small encounter with Diane's ex, it might be, or friend.
Yeah, maybe, yeah.
And they've switched apartments and they discover a body, which is kind of I think, turning point for this narrative, is where things kind of get real, or a bubble is kind of burst in some way.
Yes, they kind of like you were saying, I suppose, when they go make the phone call to the police, it's like quite a jolly adventure, really. And the stake, especially because they don't really know who Rita is, the stakes feel quite low, and it's just like, let's figure it out. And then suddenly there's a body, and it does all kind of start to spiral from that moment.
It reminds me of Stand By Me a little bit. You know, just the idea that finding a body is just a thing.
Yeah.
It's just a cool thing.
Another great movie.
The Rita then makes a disguise, which makes her look a lot like Betty.
Yes.
And I feel like things are the reality of the film is collapsing quite quickly at this point.
Yeah.
Then there is, I'm not sure that we've had this scene where I love this scene so much, where the casting director takes Betty to Adams. This is one I mentioned before, where you kind of feel like this is where that connection will be made, which will set things to right, and there's a good path, sliding doors moment, and we're going to get onto the good version of reality. And that doesn't happen. And instead what happens is but I love what's happening on that scene, on that set. Just, again, miming to, like, this. I remember Kim Newman's review of Mulholland Drive. I fucking printed it out. I loved it so much. And I think he talks about this. I think he describes it as weaponized kitsch.
Right.
Just the 16 Reasons. And it's the lady who used to be on Home and Away, who is Camilla.
Oh, right.
It's her headshot. Yeah, there's lots of Australian actresses in this. Well, there's two. Naomi Watts and the lady whose name I can't remember. I just love the feel of... There's a sense of dread to Adam being put through the motions and having to perform this way in front of everybody. And then the actresses are performing, but they're miming these insane old hits, which are then obviously pinning the story to the 1950s in a way. And yes, and then Betty doesn't quite meet Adam, which I guess is the crucial part of this version of reality.
Again, I appreciate the way that it kind of subverts my expectations, because the question is he going to say this is the girl, or isn't he going to say it?
Right.
You know, that's the big thing hanging over that scene. But when Betty's going, obviously I want her to perform, I want her to get the role, and it feels like that's going to be
what you want is for her to somehow interrupt that, and for them him to say this is the girl,
yeah,
and then for that to be so obviously true that it defeats the nefarious forces at play in Hollywood.
Yes.
No, it doesn't happen.
Or even that he then has to overcome, you know, the consequences of having chosen the wrong girl, in inverted commas. What I could never have expected is what actually happens, where she doesn't even meet him. You know, she's in the room. It's interesting, you know, this is ostensibly like her dream, and she's right there. She's about to achieve it, really. She's about to perform for a properly big role, and she walks away from it. It's just and with their weird
reason?
connection.
What do they remember? It's just that she's got to meet
I think
Rita.
she's worried that she's got to meet Rita. They had to get a taxi.
The way I interpreted this scene was this is where, you know, and the way I interpreted the whole movie is we're in Betty's fantasy for most of it, and it's at moments like this where Betty's fantasy starts to crumble, because she is faced within her fantasy the face of one of the two people who's prompted her into this dramatic action that she's decided to take, and she's faced with real reality here. I mean, there's so many layers of interpretation you could put on this. Like it's about chasing your dream. It's about the often harsh realities of naive people who go to Hollywood with a dream, and that dream comes crashing down. And here, I think it's Betty's fantasy, this construction that she's created, crashing when she is met with something that prompts a recognition and a remembrance of the reality of what has actually happened. And she's so startled by it that she has to just flee from it. Like the way Adam looks at her, it's almost like you can't really tell whether he's, because at this point Adam doesn't know who Betty is. He's never met her before. Why is he fixated by her?
Because she's got the genuine spark from
yes,
her.
but she's got the
He's
spark.
what she's looking.
But
she's
also
what he's
there's
looking
like
for.
it's like at that moment he isn't the real Adam. He's Betty's fantasy version of Adam, and he's looking at her with like a glare that pierces through this fabricated construction of hers, and she can't face that. She can't handle it, and her only response, even within the fantasy, is to run away from it.
Flee. Well, I guess the dream can never really be real, and this is a moment, like you say, where it's kind of like, well, it's going to happen then, and then it's like magnets.
But it's also sorry, Dave, just a great comment on, I think, how we're all expecting what we have said.
Yeah.
Betty's going to meet Adam. Adam's going to be like, yeah, this is the girl, because that is how we have been conditioned to read these kind of stories. That is what happens. The heroine, wannabe actress who's great, who's just done this amazing audition, meets the director, she gets cast, and it's a major success. But it's also David Lynch basically saying, nah, sometimes things that you think are going to happen, the Hollywoodization and the romanticism of someone going to LA and chasing their dream of becoming an actor, most of the time it doesn't work out, and you get stuck doing some thankless task, or so other people are successful instead of you, and sometimes that's because you're not as good as you hope you are. Sometimes it's because of corruption from higher ups, but like the dream of Hollywood isn't real. And so I hate it when successful people are like, they'll stand up when they've won an Oscar and they'll be like, and this just proves that you always follow your dreams, work hard and follow your dreams. And for 99% of people is bullshit. 99% of people will not achieve their dreams. And so I quite like the way David Lynch is like, well,
most people
don't have a dream. And of course, dreams might not come true. They probably won't.
And the natural next step in that is that Betty would go home and have sex with Rita. Obviously,
some dreams do come true.
I feel like David Lynch's dream.
David Lynch's dream. Yeah.
In this instance, very much came true. This, in a way, this scene like it bothers me a little. But I will say, it's genuinely emotional. Like I feel like as much as I look at this, and I've always looked at this scene slightly askance and gone, so you've made your hot women make out in bed without any clothes on. Congratulations. But also, did we really need that? And I guess I would say more than, well, I think that I think eroticism and sensuality and nude women can be artistic, and I think if they ever are, they are in this film. This scene is genuinely moving. There's a moment where Naomi Watts and she's almost shocked, just says, "I love you" twice. Yeah. And even watching this movie again and not knowing where to place this on the kind of spectrum of reality or what it means, the desperation of two people connecting amid a mystery which is getting more and more severe, and there's like a dead body and the stakes are being raised. I find it genuinely affecting, which is ridiculous to say, while it's also, a scene of two hot women.
Yeah, but those two things don't have to be mutually exclusive.
Thanks, Dave.
And I do think, in a universe of sex scenes in movies, this is one of the ones that feels more purposeful at least, and effective. And like you said, I think it's like there's actual real emotion in there, and it marks a change in their relationship that I suppose you've started to suspect a little bit. I feel like, I wasn't like surprised or shocked. And also I think that when the film progresses and you understand or are presented with more about those two characters and how they might be, who they might be at this point and all that kind of stuff, it becomes very interesting. Like that, the idea of that, that them having sex is just like, what does it mean? Who is it? Is it in someone's mind? Is it are they the same person? I think it's actually kind of like, I think that it is a valuable scene, and it is really tasteful and good. I liked it.
Tasteful.
Yes.
Do you know, I will say as well, having watched, like I said, I've been watching all of his films. This is the third film in a row where the female leads of his film are tastefully, very deliberately taking all their clothes off for the camera. And did I read this out? There's a bit on, no, I didn't, I don't think. There's a bit in where he's talking to Chris Rodley in the book Lynch on Lynch, which I would say everybody should read. It's really, really interesting and insightful. And he talks about taking up photography in the 1980s, I think, or 70s. And he said that initially he just took pictures of factories and nude women.
Yes.
And I feel like he's very much still on his mind in 1999, 2001.
Not too many factories in Mulholland Drive.
Not as many.
No.
Some beautiful shots of Hollywood and the sign and the town. Anyway, they have sex.
They do.
And then they go to Club Silencio, because in the middle of the night Rita wakes up and says, Silencio,
yes.
no hay banda.
Yes.
No hay banda.
Yes.
And then they go to Club Silencio, which is the best scene in a film. I think it's the best scene.
I don't think it's the best scene in this film, but I really enjoyed it, but I've enjoyed other scenes more.
It's all recorded. No! Banda! It is all a tape. Il n'est pas d'orchestre. It is an illusion.
But tell me, I mean, Rob, do you agree it's the best scene?
It's the best scene in the film.
Tell me why you guys think it's the best scene.
Talk through the scene.
I imagine Nathan will have some more thoughtful comments on it, but it's still fairly raw in my mind. I thought it was, again, there's like an inexplicable tension to it. Like you can see Betty and Rita are being affected by what's happening on stage. Later on in the film, we can maybe understand a little bit why Betty would be so startled at what's going on stage. But we're being told by the person on stage that everything is an illusion. Nothing is real. Everything is pre-recorded. It's a tape. It's a tape. And he demonstrates the fact that it's a tape by you get recordings of brass instruments being played, and he's there signaling with his hands. He's obviously learnt this routine so well in his mind that he's able to just beautifully perform it. He's able to mimic it, and you get this, incredible illusion of him making the instruments come out of his hands. And he looks you in the eyes, looking Betty in the eyes, looking us, the audience, in the eye as he's doing it with this piercingly unsettling glare. And then he introduces, I can't remember her name, the singer comes out.
Rebecca Del
Rio comes out and...
Oh, that bit of music is amazing.
And sings this incredible song. And then halfway through the performance of the song, and I'm unsure still now whether that is I think it's probably part of the performance within the film. She collapses, but the song continues.
Yeah.
And you realise that this too has been an illusion. She's miming, even though... she's performing it so incredibly. She collapses. The song continues. She's taken off stage, and sort of that is what freaks Betty out the most. We're reaching like a crescendo of, and there's the same. I felt the same watching this as I did watching the original Winkies scene at the beginning, but to a greater extent here. This was I felt just incredibly on edge at this point. Like something's about to happen. What the heck's going on here? Beyond just the impressiveness of what was happening on the stage, just the man just looking at me in the eye. And doesn't he, like, the smoke comes up and he just sort of like disappears and fades away. I don't know if I have any sort of interpretation beyond that, other than that it's basically David Lynch here saying this is the film, this is the theme of the film, the essence of the film. I'm showing it to you here now on stage. Everything is fake, everything's an illusion. Whether or not he's talking about the story of this film in particular, or filmmaking as a whole, or Hollywood, or dreams and reality, or whether or not it's something that he's just like, this is fun, isn't it? Watch this. I don't know, exactly what's going on there, and probably it's not meant to mean any one thing, but it really unsettled me. It blew me away for many reasons, and yeah, I'm interested to hear what you think about it, Nath, as someone who's probably seen this many times.
I basically think almost exactly the same as you. I thought that was incredibly well summarised. That I think in terms of if there are sort of grander interpretations, I think those are the ones that I think of as well. And same, I guess most importantly, I don't think that one is exclusively more true than the others. But then also just that the scene itself, the reason that those potential meanings are significant or impactful is because the scene itself is just on a moment to moment level, just incredibly dramatic and interesting to watch. Yeah. And I think that's got to do with where we are in the story. It's got to do with like the Cinderella narrative and the innocence of Betty, and then the kind of the genre setup of her and Rita, and the amnesiac storyline, and where that's got to, and the sort of innocence of all of that, and then suddenly crashed into by the sex, and then waking up in bed together after the sex. There's that amazing shot of when Rita is lying down saying things in her sleep. Betty is in the background, and their faces are kind of molded into each other and matched, and then she's just like, go with me somewhere. And it's just like, I remember I described last time, I think, watching movies late at night on Channel 4 as a teenager, and just them taking me into like interesting, unusual places that felt kind of forbidden. And the idea of just waking up in LA in like 2 o'clock in the morning and going, let's go to a fucking weird club where stuff might happen. That has that same, like, why are they there? Where are they? There's that shot of them entering. There's this empty kind of backlot or whatever the hell it is. And the camera, it waits for them to go into the door, and then it rushes up to the Club Silencio door. Yeah. And then inside it is a real abandoned downtown LA theatre, steep red chairs, a classic Lynchian curtains performance space, with that man. And you're right, he does the same trick. I remember vividly watching this for the first time and just being like super intrigued, because you're like, are we going to get some answers? What's happening? Are we going to find out who Rita is? They're so engaged. And again, I feel like it's a Lynchian trick where he shows people reacting, and you, like empathetic creatures, we just react the same. I think I told you about Bobby and his dad, right? Like in the scene in Twin Peaks. I almost cried at the end when I watched it this time, at the end of the audition scene. I was just like overcome. I was like, Jesus Christ. So anyway, you've got Rita and Betty in the audience just being, and the fact that they're engaged makes you engaged. He brings out a muted trumpet player who just goes doodle-loop, doodle-loop, and then one time he doesn't do it, and you're like, he keeps on saying there's no band. And now it turns out there is no band. And then Rebecca Del Rio comes out, and her performance is unreal. Yeah. And she's singing a version of Roy Orbison's Crying. Right. So it's got this relationship with Blue Velvet in playing In Dreams. Crying was the track that David Lynch originally wanted for that, until he heard In Dreams, and he was like, fuck Crying, I'm going to have In Dreams instead. So it's kind of in dialogue with that scene with Ben and his light singing, miming in front of Frank. And it's, he's miming. Yeah. He's miming in Blue Velvet. And then Betty's crying and Rita's crying, and you're like, we're getting into the soul of something. I don't know what it is. This mystery, we've got to be somewhere close to the heart of the mystery. And then Rebecca Del Rio falls over, and I remember feeling betrayed. I remember just feeling like, no, this has to be real. And then obviously, I think you're right, Rob, whether it's to do with this scene or the films in general or whatever, you kind of like, someone is saying this is an illusion. And of course, none of it's real. But the feelings that I'm feeling are real. And I don't know what that means.
Yeah.
But I felt like it was a really impactful message. I read just yesterday that I was reading an interview with John Nath, who was David Lynch's musical engineer, and they made some albums together. He built the studio for Lynch in Lynch's house, the house that I went to visit. And he was saying that Rebecca, so I think it was years where David Lynch just got super into music, and he would have people come to his house and they would play music. He made some albums. He made albums for other people. Rebecca Del Rio was like introduced to him, and David was like, you want to just sing something? And people obviously want to impress David Lynch because they might collaborate with him or whatever, or just because they're artists just exploring things together. And so she stood up to sing. And then he was like, no, why don't we go over next door and we can record it in my studio? And she was like, oh, okay. Obviously a bit nervous. Apparently she chose this song, which she had translated into Spanish. And I don't know if she knew about Blue Velvet or any of those things, but what a bit of, what a crossover. She got it wrong the first time just because she was nervous. And then John Neff says, what you hear in the film is just the second time at David Lynch's house. She just sang the whole thing from start to finish. And they were like, well, holy fucking shit. And then David Lynch said, how would you like to be in a movie?
Wow.
And then, or a TV show, as I think it was then. Yeah. And I think similarly to the Red Room stuff in Twin Peaks, which was, I told you that to get the money to finish, so they do a closed version of the pilot where everything is answered. And the Red Room stuff was invented for that version of Twin Peaks. So that was there. They shot that before any of the season. They had that weird Red Room stuff. It comes out in episode 3 or whatever. And similarly, this Club Silencio stuff was shot as part of the pilot, and it was the end of the pilot. But they're not included in the actual part. It might have turned up in episode 3 or 4 or whatever, but then came back for. And so I guess it has a similar. What would I say? It's like a move to abstraction in order to close off an idea that might otherwise have been open-ended. And in that way, it's kind of parallel to the Red Room in Twin Peaks. But yeah, otherwise, Rob, I just totally agree with you. But I just think it's just like unbelievably moving, and I'm not even completely sure why.
Also, you have the key bit that happens where Betty discovers the blue box in her bag. I was just been there the whole time.
And Rita's had
the key.
I
can't remember where she gets the key.
I think she just has it in her purse. Yeah, I think so. Well, and the reason for that might be prosaic, right? Which is
along with all of that money, all of that cash.
Oh yeah.
Yes, yeah. So, and one last thing is that you have that Rebecca Del Rio is introduced as La Llorona de Los Angeles, right? And I think Llorona is like a figure in Spanish myth or Mexican myth of like a crying, like a mourning, lamenting woman, which is why she's singing a version of crying. And there's that person up on the balcony and a blue wig. And that's, I think, maybe a more archetypal version of the same character. But the idea of like just a crying woman. So there's kind of like this mythical element to the stage.
I was going to ask about that because obviously that character comes back as well.
And just at the end, Silencio.
Yeah.
So they go back to the apartment. Betty's done pretty. So they're like, okay, we're going to open this box, man. Fucking hell, I've got a box, you've got a key, and then she's just gone.
Yeah.
And then Rita says, I thought it was the first time I'd ever really clocked it. She says in Spanish, "Where are you?" She doesn't say it in English. She hasn't spoken Spanish at any other point.
Yeah.
I don't know what was going on there. But Betty has literally just vanished.
Yeah.
Forever. And they haven't even turned the box yet.
Yes. And I guess at this point, I was like, oh, okay. Yeah. And my mind starts racing like, oh, has Betty ever been there? Is it just of course, Rita had, she's got a concussion. She's hit her head. Like, oh yeah, she's probably not been there the whole time. Has she been a figment of her imagination the whole time? My brain's trying to like run through this. And then at the same time, she's opening the box and the box falls on the floor and then no one's in the room. And I was like, hang on. Okay, maybe I'll just...
Yeah, Betty's aunt is back.
I'll pause thinking about all of that.
So there's this, right in the beginning of David Lynch's very first film, Eraserhead, I can't remember what we go into. I think it's maybe an eye. Oh, I can't remember. But he says really specifically that the importance is that you go through one thing into another thing, and then you're in a different world. And we go into the box.
Right. Yes, that's right.
I love that the box is kind of perfectly constructed. So the little triangle turns, but
Yes.
it looks like it's smooth all around the edges. And then we're in just a completely different reality. And I don't even know if I find this bit less. I don't know how much there is to say about it. I don't dislike this section. It's quite sad, obviously. All of this section is the section which was shot to conclude the film.
Right.
So I think almost all of this was new. And apparently that's why Naomi Watts looks quite different. It's a couple of years later.
Right. Oh, wow. Yeah, I mean, the rest of the film is challenging in as much as this is the bit where I was thinking about it a lot, how to describe it. And it's almost like the plot is like a spiral rather than a circle. Like all these scenes you expect it's going to explain everything, and you go, oh, right. And you start thinking, oh, well, this character is actually that character. And that time, even like when Diane, I think it is now, is in the limo, and she says, we don't stop here. And the guy turns around and you're like, oh, so it was actually the start of the movie it wasn't Rita or, what's her actual name?
Camilla.
Or maybe actual name Camilla. In the back, it was always Diane, but then a different thing happens, and it's like, no, wait a minute, that's wrong. It's like the plot. I try and make it all add up, and every time I do that, it gets smaller and smaller, and so it just misses each time. It just misses, and sort of spirals inwards. And I suppose
it's like that impossible 3D shape illusion.
Yeah, exactly.
Where you can't ever quite pin it down.
Yeah, exactly.
Escher.
And like an Escher painting, and and so I think just having this knowledge of having watched a few of these now and the conversations we've had, I stopped trying to add it all up and started to just properly accept now that Mulholland Drive wasn't going to buck the trend and go like, and this is what was happening.
There's some people on the internet who really have tried to separate and plan and plot.
Yeah.
And I think that even if in Lynch's head, he was like, this is exactly what this means to me, and I'm just not going to tell anybody else. I don't think surely that's not as important as the impact. Like you said, Rob, watching that Club Silencio scene, what's important is the fact that it made us, how it made us all go, Jesus Christ.
Yeah. And it probably is the least interesting part of the film, really, because in that way it kind of tries to, well, it doesn't try to do anything because he's not trying to explain it, but it's sort of like it sort of fills in some blanks but actually doesn't at all.
It's very dark.
It is very dark. It's just sad. It's just unpleasant. And then obviously like Diane's spiral that culminates in an incredibly unusual scene with the old lady and the fella there from the taxi.
Chased by,
I don't even know what to say about that.
Well, I guess the if we was reaching for the lowest shelf explanation, it is that they represent her, some kind of pressure of the naivety of her original dream, and that's the thing which is on her mind when she kills herself.
Right.
Where it's kind of like, just when sometimes you're like, I'm so stupid, like this has gone wrong, and how I was so stupid to ever think that it could have gone right. And they are a representation of that naivety and that wanting to succeed.
And they chase her into her room. It's so strange.
It's fucking horrible.
They're just small as well. That's so weird.
That
they wouldn't just be those characters, human sized, just sort of like terrorizing her.
It's weird that they're tiny
house.
and they come out of the bag. Behind the Winkies. Yeah, I've forgotten about that. So there are some like pretty solid clues, aren't there? I call them clues, and I'll tell you why in a sec. But the hitman gives the blue key. And it says, I will leave this for you. And, obviously at the beginning, Rita has a key. One of I quite like, I'm not adverse to people having opinions which offer a different kind of flavour, or I just don't think there's, the one truth of this film. But I read and I was interested in the idea that you kind of mentioned it, Dave, obliquely. You kind of go through saying, Naomi Watts is always one person, so Betty and Diane, and they kind of flip. And obviously that's kind of true. But also that maybe, the fact that at the beginning Rita has the key, Rita is a version of Betty as well. And they're both in the limo, they're both in that kind of scene. Different projections or, versions of the same person. But certainly the blue key being like a through line. Or just the idea that if we take the end of the film to be the more depressing but kind of concrete reality of someone who tried to come to Hollywood, tried to succeed, didn't succeed, in a bitterness spiral, ends up arranging for her more successful sometime girlfriend to be murdered, and then tries to retreat into some kind of dream because of that. Kind of makes sense, doesn't it? It's a bit sad.
It's really interesting, this need for explanation. It's something I really struggle with, or I didn't think I struggled with it, but now I think I struggle with it. And also I've been a bit freed of by watching these films. I always love The Prestige. And I always think about the explanation of a magic trick that's given in The Prestige. And it's so true, it's so clever that, and if you don't know it, you should watch The Prestige. Maybe we'll watch it one day.
Oh, we should.
And it's the thing being that it's basically, as soon as you reveal how it's done, no one's interested anymore.
Yeah.
It's not, magic is only interesting when you don't know. It's the mystery, it's the wonder. And that feels so true more than ever, maybe in Mulholland Drive. Like, I think if it was all just added up at the end, I'd just kind of walk away going like, oh, okay. Oh, yeah, that makes sense. And would it be as effective? Would I feel the same way about these like just incredible scenes that just stand alone if there was a neat kind of solution to everything? And I really don't know, but it's I feel like I've discovered a new part of myself, or I've let go of that need quite so, that I've had this heavy need to have everything explained and everything be neat, and it's been nice to kind of let go of that a bit. And I enjoy that it doesn't, like I said, it kind of almost makes sense, and it keeps you thinking about it. I keep trying to make sense of bits, and it's obviously open to interpretation.
Yeah.
And probably there is no interpretation, and that's just fascinating to me. To be able to create this, to write something like this, it's just fascinating to me, because I would not be able to do that, because I would want everything would have to all hang together in some completely normal way.
To do it just on vibes, I think is so interesting. And I will say that having watched Fire Walk with Me, I really on a deep level just did not enjoy loads of just the scenes in that. Just had a visceral kind of just dislike of loads of them. So it's not like I just love Lynch unconditionally or whatever. This film is just so good. It's fucking great.
Yeah.
And I think that the end, all of that sadness, and then to just get these superimposed images of Betty and Rita smiling behind the lights of Hollywood, I think that's quite a nice ending. I think it represents some kind of dream of what could be.
Well, like I said at the start, I really don't know what I felt at the end, but I felt it I just sat there for a solid 5 minutes, I think, just completely in silence with the television off, just feeling something. It was weird, like it was almost physical. It was like in me. I could feel this. It was strange. I felt a whole mixture of things, and was still trying to like piece things together and figure it out. It was really affecting experience, and I really hope no one has just listened to us talk about this movie without watching it.
I feel like it's one of the films you really have to see.
Yeah.
Maybe we should put a warning up at the beginning.
We should,
otherwise,
because I don't think it would spoil it, but it would. It would spoil the experience of watching it for the first time. It's not like we would have spoiled
just
any of the plot points, but
when you record the intro, you'll have already heard it, everyone, by now.
Yes.
Please. Hope we did it.
Yeah, so do I.
So we should wrap up. We've gone way over time.
Yeah.
Thank you, both of you, for coming along and watching some David Lynch. I hope you've enjoyed. Would you say that you're David Lynch fans?
God, that's a great question. I would be worried about saying that, I think, which is the sad truth, in as much as, kind of like maybe you've spoken about before, I feel like that would open me up to, I'd expose myself to real David Lynch fans who would discover me as a fraud somehow.
It's been interesting, yeah, because I think I have re-engaged with loads of stuff which I have not, I used to be super into David Lynch and have been picking up bits and pieces, and there is like a Twin Peaks festival in North Bend. There's like loads of stuff, and I think that there is some gatekeeping in that. Of course, like there is in every fandom. But it's just interesting to remember that this is like almost parallel to like a Star Trek fandom. There are Twin Peaks fans who are lunatics.
Yeah, so I don't know if, even despite the fact that I have really enjoyed, especially this film, I feel like saying you're a David Lynch fan is something you have to earn. I don't feel like I've leveled up enough yet in the David Lynch fandom stakes. I'm intrigued to watch some of his other films though, and I intend to do so and watch the rest of Twin Peaks as well.
I think maybe hopefully you'd really like Lost Highway. And I watched The Straight Story recently as well, like last weekend at the cinema, and I really, really love that film. It's so good, and it's just nice. It's just really, it's just really, really good. And it might be that we could do a couple of bonus episodes. And more than anything, I'm really glad that you enjoyed this. And then we got to watch it together.
Hang on, Nath. Are you a David Lynch fan now? Because you described at the start of this little mini journey your kind of complicated relationship with Lynch, and then you've sort of rediscovered your love
enthusiasm
of him.
Yeah, it's funny. I would probably say no because I just don't want to be associated, like you said, with those sort of diehard fans. I feel less precious. I feel less weird. I've watched a bunch of his stuff at the cinema with other people over the last few weeks. And I'm good. There's a couple more coming up, actually, which I'll probably go and watch as well. And so, yeah, I would. Yeah, I'm a David Lynch fan. Really, really like his stuff. But in like the nicest, you believe what you want to believe.
I'm a nice David Lynch fan.
Yeah, I'm one of the good guys, everyone.
You've never met a David Lynch fan like me.
Yeah. We're going to do this David Lynch fandom real close. So next, we're going to be shortly moving on to watching the Star Wars movies, as we've discussed. Next week, we're going to take a little bit of a break, and we're going to have a mailbag episode just so we can draw a breath before entering
a galaxy far, far away.
Thank you, Rob. I was going to say that needed to be said.
Yeah, I was trying to remember what it was. Before then, we've got a bonus episode, which will be part 2 of our cinema memories, which everybody seemed to enjoy the first one of those. So look forward to that. That'll be out on Wednesday. Back with Mailbag next week, and then on to Star Wars. Thank you very much. Hope you've enjoyed David Lynch as much as I have, and we'll see you again soon. You've been listening to Red Shirt Cinema Club. If you're enjoying the podcast and would like to receive 2 exclusive episodes per month, please consider supporting us on Patreon. Just check the link in the description. We'd also love to hear from you. Email us at redshirtcinemaclub@gmail.com or follow us on social media. We'll be back with another episode next Monday.